We're Climate Web, a comprehensive knowledge base for all things relating to climate change and climate risk. And we're going to explore today a couple of the topics that are being discussed extensively. Now, there is a lot of discussion of a 2-degree target, a lot of discussion around 2-degree scenario planning for climate change. And you can dig into that in as much detail as you want in the Climate Web, as shown by this single index entry, one of thousands of index entries in the Climate Web. But what I want to focus on today is one aspect of the scenario planning conversation, which is worst case climate change. Now, when I say worst case climate change, I'm not talking about saying that climate change is causing a huge meteor to hit the Earth, or that climate change will cause the Yellowstone volcano to blow up and pretty much destroy all life on Earth. I'm talking about worst case climate change from an evidence-based standpoint, from a literature-based standpoint. Now, you can come into the Climate Web and explore worst case climate change, again, in as much detail as you want. We have the literature, we have the news stories, we have the videos, we have all kinds of things organized in the Climate Web. But a lot of people don't want to come in and do this digging themselves. And so what I want to show you in this video is some of the different ways that we're helping you access the Climate Web to explore the topic of worst case. Now, one thing that we don't talk enough about is that worst case is in the eye of the beholder. Societal worst case and business worst case climate change are very different things. 10 feet of possible sea level rise by 2100, definitely part of a societal worst case, not really part of a business worst case, because no business has a timeline that extends out to 2100. At the same time, 2-degree carbon pricing, definitely part of a business risk, and not really part of a societal worst case. But you can come in and under this tagged collection of societal worst case climate change headings, you can explore a lot of the discussions that are ongoing that contribute to the topic of a climate change worst case from a societal perspective. Conflict over Arctic resources, climate tipping points triggered, climate feedbacks, adaptation limits, abrupt climate change, planetary boundaries. The list goes on and on, but it's all of the different variables that are being discussed in the context of what could happen with climate change during a societally relevant time frame. And we also introduced the topic of pre-mortems, which is a way of thinking about something like this and telling the story in a way that helps make sense of it and helps internalize it into decision making. But what we've also organized in another tagged collection, and these are just a couple of hundreds of tagged collections in the Climate Web, is business worst case climate change headings. And by headings, we mean index entries, headings, sources, headings, news stories, extracted ideas and graphics, websites. All of these fall under the category of headings, and there are many more. I wanted to keep it to what would fit here on the screen. And there is some overlap between the societal worst case and the business worst case, not surprisingly, because a lot of the physical risk variables that are relevant to the societal worst case are also relevant to the business worst case, although potentially on a different time frame. But here, the 1.5 degree C target, potentially a worst case variable for business planning. Again, bad luck with long-tailed risk events. Climate liability is a business variable, business worst case variable. Food system shocks. Exceedance curves is a very useful way of quantifying worst case scenarios. Investor response as business risk. Market transformation as business risk. The social cost of carbon as a carbon price. All of these things are relevant to getting your heads around what could climate change look like from a worst case perspective for a particular business, and perhaps how should you be bounding your climate change scenarios to take this kind of thinking into account. And so we make it easy by pointing you to all kinds of information that's in the climate web, but we also then take it a step further. So for example, I can click on this tagged collection, again, one of hundreds, Societal Worst Case Climate Change 101. And this pulls together a small subset of information, some of the key reports, key news stories, key videos, key graphics and ideas, key index headings, and also this preset search term, which is very useful, where you can literally sort of check on the latest what pops up in Google, Google Scholar, Vimeo, Quora, around the topic of worst case climate change. And so you can come in here and very easily sort of come up to speed pretty darn quickly on the societal worst case climate change 101 conversation. And you can do the same for the business worst case climate change 101 conversation. But I also want to show you a subset of that, which is the systemic risk climate change conversation. Systemic risk is a relatively new topic just in the last couple of years, but it's been growing very rapidly during that period. It is probably the single risk that is most underrepresented in business thinking and business planning, partially because it's a risk that's very hard for individual companies to manage on their own. It takes a systemic response to manage a systemic risk. But in this tagged collection, we've pulled together sort of everything you need to know to come up to speed very quickly on systemic climate risk and the conversation that's going on around that. And that's definitely a part of thinking about, how bad could climate change be for purposes of business planning. So that's a quick look at a few of these topics in the Climate Web. You can learn more by going to the Climate Web website, theclimateweb.com. You can explore it. A lot of this is open access in the Climate Web at theclimateweb.org. You can download it and use it yourself, or we can help you use it as the climatographers. We're happy to talk about that, and you can contact us through information shown up here on your screen. Thanks.